So awesome to see you all again. Get ready for some more chilling stories. Today we're going to be taking a look at the story of Hitchhiker Killer. But before we get started, have you subscribed? If not, then what are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button so you can be notified every time I post a new video. Now let's get started. On December 1978, 19-year-old Gerald Schaefer boarded a bus in Miami, Florida, and headed north. He was hitchhiking to West Palm Beach, about 70 miles away. At some point during the ride, he left the bus and continued on foot. After that, nobody knows what happened to him until now. 2 weeks have passed. His battered body was discovered on the side of the road by a passing motorist who had no idea how he got there. Gerald had been stabbed several times and died instantly. His killer was never caught. Now, this could have been an isolated incident, just some random act of violence committed by a stranger. Except it wasn't. Gerald was one of 30 men that were killed in almost exactly the same way over a 6-month period in 1978 and 1979. The murders happened all across the United States, spanning from Santa Cruz, California to New York City, spanning multiple states in between. All the victims were young men between the ages of 14 and 20. They were usually found on the side of rural roads or in secluded areas close to highways, having been stabbed multiple times with a sharp, thin object like a screwdriver or an ice pick. Some of the bodies had clearly been run over, their injuries consistent with the crushing weight of tires and steel. But many others showed no such signs. They appeared to have collapsed where they stood or were placed there after death, untouched by vehicles. The contrast hinted at a disturbing possibility, that the vehicular damage may have been used to mask the true cause of death in some cases, or perhaps to destroy evidence. What stood out most was what hadn't been taken. Wallets, phones, purses, and even jewelry remained with the victims, often still clutched tightly in their hands or lying just inches away. It was as though they had been attacked mid-step, with no warning and no time to react. The fact that their belongings were left behind suggested that robbery wasn't the motive. Whatever drove the killer or killers, it wasn't greed. It was something else, something colder. Despite the brutality of the attacks, there didn't appear to be any sexual component to them. To this day, authorities don't know if all these crimes were committed by the same person or persons, or even if they were all related. However, they did uncover one key piece of evidence that led them to believe that at least some of these crimes may have been connected. And that clue is what we'll be exploring today: the bizarre behavioral pattern behind the Hitchhiker Killer case. It was August 1979 when a terrified hitchhiker flagged down a passing motorist on a desolate stretch of highway in western Illinois. The driver, a 68-year-old woman named Helen, stopped to offer him a ride, but she soon regretted her decision. As soon as the young man slid into the front seat of her car, he pulled out a pair of scissors and threatened her life. He told her he needed a ride to the next town where he would catch a bus to Chicago. Once there, he said he planned to steal a car and drive to California. Helen was terrified, but she complied and drove him to the train station, all the while keeping a lookout for police officers to pull her over. After dropping the hitchhiker off, she called the local sheriff to report the crime. When police arrived at the station, they were able to apprehend the suspect, a 19-year-old boy named Billy, who gave them a false name. They brought him in for questioning, but he was released without charge after Helen failed to identify him in a lineup. Police let Billy go with a warning, but Helen knew something wasn't right. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just narrowly escaped a serial killer. So she took matters into her own hands and began searching for him on her own. Helen learned the real name of her attacker was William Bonin, and soon discovered that he had quite a criminal history, including arrests for burglary and sex offenses. Determined to see justice done, Helen lobbied the police to take another look at William, eventually convincing them to bring him in again. This time, Helen was able to identify him and he was charged with kidnapping and assault. However, the charges against William were soon upgraded to murder after police uncovered a horrifying secret. While searching his house, they found 2 pairs of scissors that matched the ones used in the attack, as well as a loaded revolver and a diary. It was a dark, leather-bound volume filled with disturbing details of William's horrific crimes. In the diary, he detailed how he picked up hitchhikers, brought them back to his house and tortured them before killing them. He wrote about burying his victims in shallow graves in the backyard, and he bragged about how many men he had killed. In total, William confessed to 45 murders, although authorities believe he actually killed at least 21 people. He was also linked to a series of unsolved child murders. That's why investigators continued combing through his diary in the hopes that they would find more names of his victims. And that's when they came across a chilling revelation. William had written about meeting a man named John in Las Vegas. John had asked him for help disposing of a body, and in return, William had given him the name of a potential victim. But as investigators continued reading, they realized with horror that the man he described didn't just mean any random person, he meant himself. William had written about giving John the name of a hitchhiker he had picked up on the side of the road. He had given John directions to a secluded area where he planned to kill the unsuspecting man and bury him in a shallow grave. But John never showed up. So police decided to dig deeper. They began scouring missing persons reports and death certificates in search of a man who matched the description of William's alleged victim. Their investigation led them to Los Angeles, where they discovered the records of a young man named Stephen, who had gone missing in 1979. Stephen had been hitchhiking to San Diego when he disappeared, and the last confirmed sighting of him placed him in Las Vegas around the same time William was there. Furthermore, a witness had seen Stephen enter a car driven by a man matching John's description. But here's the thing. Police never did end up finding William's supposed victim in Las Vegas. And John, the man he supposedly met there, well, he turned out to be an undercover narcotics officer named Jay Delk. Officer Delk had been working on a drug sting operation at the time and had picked up a hitchhiker in Las Vegas. But that hitchhiker was definitely not Stephen. The man he had picked up was actually Gerald Schaefer, the first victim in our story. As it turns out, William Bonin had been stalking the Las Vegas Strip looking for someone to kill when he saw Gerald hitching a ride. William killed Gerald on the side of the road and then contacted Jay Delk, pretending to be a hitchhiker needing a ride. Jay agreed and brought him back to his hotel room where they discussed the drug deal. When Jay went to use the bathroom, William snuck out of the room and made it look like a robbery. He ransacked the place, stole the money, and planted drugs all over the floor. But unfortunately for William, Jay noticed that the bedsheets were missing. He didn't buy William's story that he had left Gerald in the desert to die. Instead, he contacted the police, tipped them off about the situation, and helped them catch William red-handed. So was William the only killer? Not likely. Although William confessed to 45 murders, investigators believe he actually killed at least 21 people. That's because there were several other unsolved crimes that had eerie similarities to his MO, like the fact that many of his victims were found within 40 miles of where he lived. And while his travel patterns were somewhat predictable, they did leave a large swath of the United States potentially open to his attacks. Although William acted alone, he certainly wasn't the only hitchhiker killer operating at the time. Take, for example, the case of Otis Toole. Otis was a drifter who moved from Florida to California in 1978. There, he met a 19-year-old runaway named Danny Rolling. Together, they embarked on a violent crime spree that lasted nearly a year. During that time, they kidnapped, tortured, and murdered at least 15 young men. After hearing about each other's crimes, Otis and Danny partnered up. They continued to lure hitchhikers into their car, bringing them to secluded areas where they beat them and stabbed them to death. Otis later claimed to have killed 40 people, but like William, he was only convicted of a fraction of his crimes. What's most terrifying is that Otis and Danny worked together for a short time with a third killer, a man known only as the Poet. The trio roamed the country looking for victims, sleeping in their car when they weren't out hunting. They abandoned their cross-country killing spree in 1979 when Danny was sent to prison for armed robbery. It's believed that William, Otis, and Danny were responsible for at least 55 murders. But due to a lack of evidence, none of the cases were ever solved. There's a lot of scary things about these cases, but I think one of the scariest aspects of them is just how easy it is to fall victim to a hitchhiker killer. These guys were able to target their victims without much effort. In fact, sometimes the victims approached the cars willingly. But that's the thing. You'd never know if a seemingly kind gesture could cost you your life. Just one wrong turn, and you might wind up dead on the side of the road. So do you think these killers are truly beyond rehabilitation? I really want to know what you think, so go ahead, drop a comment below. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time I post a new video. Thanks for watching.